All right. I want to say thank you for those of you who are visiting on YouTube and for those of you on Zoom. I know we're going to wait a few more minutes for some people to come in. Ooh, I keep on forgetting to do that piece. I've got to. I forget that I have to shut off the sound on the YouTube one when it comes up. All right, that's taken care of now. You should see shared on the screen the presentation for today, which for those of you who know me know that this is an interesting topic to be covered, which is cannabis and food, exploring the advantages and the disadvantages. This is for informational purposes only. I am Karen Bukal, founder of Epicure Nutrition. Sorry for a bit of the nasally sound. I've been combating a cold all week. And this is live on YouTube as well, which is the sound that I had to shut off. So I want to thank you, those of you who are watching on YouTube. And I am going to, what am I going to do? I am going to shut me off so you don't have to see my mug and you can just look at the presentation and we'll get going with it. All right, let me hide my face. All right, there we go. So today we're going to talk a little bit about cannabis and food and exploring the advantages and the disadvantages. Once again, this is for informational purposes only. I am not promoting it. I'm not dissuading you from it. I'm going to try to keep my personal opinions out of it. I want to thank one of my interns for putting this together. Her name is Casey. Perhaps she'll be with us in a few moments. But let's start. What are we going to cover today? Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the background, advantages, disadvantages. And of course, if you're talking about cannabis and food, you have to talk about pop brownies and then what some of the recommendations might be that we have for going forward. So cannabis is composed, there are different parts to it and different parts that have different effects. So you have the cannabinoids, the THC, the CBD, which we find all over the place, and the terpenes. And ironically, the terpenes are also found in, oh, what was it the other day that I had found that it was found in? I'm going to do a quick little search to find out what it was found, what it was in. Terpenes in. Oh, so terpenes are in tea, thyme, cannabis, Spanish sage, and even in citrus fruit. So some of these, so the terpenes are just a normal chemical that are found in different types of plants. Cannabinoids are the active compounds in cannabis that interact with the body's endocannabinoid system, which is responsible for regulating the various bodily functions such as appetite, pain sensation, mood, and immune response. The THC, the tetrahydrocannabinol, is the primary psychoactive cannabinoid responsible for that high associated with cannabis. While the CBD, the cannabidiol, is the non-psychoactive cannabinoid with potential therapeutic benefits. So that's a little bit of the breakdown. The CBD has therapeutic benefits. The THC is kind of what gets you that little bit of high. I just want to make sure I have my participants up so I can let anybody in that comes in. All right. Terpenes, as I mentioned, are also found in other plants, are the aromatic compounds found in the cannabis that give it its characteristic smell and flavor. They also have potential therapeutic benefits, and they can work synergistically with cannabinoids to enhance their effects. There are some different extraction methods that are used. They can use alcohol extraction, carbon dioxide, or lipid extraction in order to get the CBD, the THC, the terpenes out in order to be able to use them. Each method has its advantages and disadvantages in terms of efficiency, safety, and the quality of the final product. So let's talk a little bit about cannabis in history. So cannabis, we also know of hemp, right? And it's used for clothing, paper. It's been used for sails, rope, food, and medicine. It has also been used in food for centuries, particularly in the form of cannabis-infused drinks and edibles in cultures such as India, where I don't even know how to say it. Bhang is an avocado green paste made with the young leaves, the flowers, and the stems of the cannabis plant. They get soaked, ground, and then mixed with whole milk or yogurt to make a shake. So I guess it would be like a pot mango lassi. I find myself funny anyway. And then in Morocco, they have the majoun, which is made from dried fruit, nuts, spices, and cannabis-infused butter. And it's that cannabis-infused butter that a lot of people use to make those pot brownies, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Today, with the growing popularity of recreational and medicinal cannabis, there have been significant increase in the availability of cannabis-infused products. I found out there was even something called Weetos, which I thought was kind of amusing. So that's a little bit about cannabis in history and how it's been used for centuries. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the advantages and the disadvantages. Oops. So let's scroll a little bit down. There we go. So some of the health benefits include pain management. It has been shown to have potential analgesic effects, and it may be effective in treating chronic pain, such as neuropathic pain and fibromyalgia. It also helps with appetite, or it helps with anxiety and depression relief in some cases. And then it also has potential antidepressant, anti-anxiety and antidepressant effects. But one of the things to remember, as with any medication, everybody's body is different and your body may react differently to this. So you need to make sure that you're not doing this without consulting your doctor first, because the different, just because cannabis is natural doesn't mean that it's not going to interact with any other prescription drugs you may be on. For example, I mean, let's just look at grapefruit. Grapefruit is a very common juice that many people have, or fruit. But if you're on certain heart medications, having the grapefruit, especially when you're on a statin, reduces the effectiveness of the statin and can cause it not to work as well. And so you want to make sure that if you're doing this, even though it's natural, as well as vitamins and minerals and other herbs you might be taking, you want to consult with your doctor and or pharmacist, and they can let you know if it's going to interact with anything else that you're taking. Appetite stimulation is very beneficial, especially for patients undergoing chemotherapy. and suffering perhaps from cachexia. As people get older, they tend to lose their appetite and not eat as much. So this could be a helpful appetite stimulant for them as well. Some other advantages is that it has been shown to help in the treatment of epilepsy, the inflammation, which can also be working with the inflammation, the pain relief, because a lot of our pain can be caused by inflammation. So by reducing our inflammation, we will find that we have relief. And then we already mentioned a little bit of some of the symptoms it can relieve from the what's caused by cancer treatment. When you're getting nausea and vomiting and you have a decreased appetite, the CBD and different products from there can help with increasing your appetite. There are actual medications that they do have out, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that are synthetic versions, but also work. It also helps with the lowering of blood pressure. For some people, it does help prevent relapse of other types of drug addiction or alcohol addiction. And it can be a rich source of protein, healthy fats, fiber, and minerals. Who knew that it had all that in there? Now, there are disadvantages, so let's talk a little bit about those. There are some regulatory issues and some legal concerns. Not every place has legal cannabis. I was just listening to a story on NPR this weekend where there's this town in Oregon that's right on the border of the Snake River, which means it's on the border of Idaho. In Oregon, pot's legal, or marijuana is legal, and in Idaho, it's not. So there are a lot, and it's near Boise as well, which is the capital of Idaho. There are a lot of people from Idaho coming over to what used to be this small little town in Oregon, very, very far from Portland, where, the coasts tend to be a little bit more liberal, where, that's a little bit more inland, it's a little bit more conservative, and a lot of the community isn't in full agreement of having marijuana legal. However, that little town has gained $2 million in tax revenue from the cannabis shops that are open there, where many of their people come from Boise, and they kind of want to be annexed to Idaho instead of being a part of Oregon. So that's just a little bit of one of the issues with regulatory issues. And there's not a whole lot. You would think, just as with any supplement, the FDA is not regulating the pot. So you don't know if you're buying it from a store, which I hope you are. Hopefully it's not going to be tainted or laced with anything. But you also don't necessarily know the quality that you're getting, nor is it regulated by anything. So that can be a problem. There is strict labeling and packaging requirements for cannabis infused food products, which is necessary. Well, we need more of that, and it can be costly and time consuming for the producers, which then increases the cost that passes it down to the consumer. And with that, some of the products seem to lure the attention of adolescents when you have lollipops, gummies, and other candies. Another regulatory issue is how to test if somebody is high. Just because it's legal, it's still something that alters. If you're having the THC compound of it, not so much the CBD compound, but the THC compound of the cannabis, there's no way to test what your limits are, nor are there any rules or regulations fully in place and how to deal with that. So you can see here the sign that says DUI, driving under the influence, doesn't just mean booze, but how can they test for the other things? So we need to catch up on that. from a legal standpoint. There are also some risks and side effects. We already talked a little bit about the drug interactions and the importance of talking with your pharmacist or doctor to make sure that's not going to happen. There can be overconsumption, especially if you're eating some of the THC infused foods. The overconsumption can lead to adverse effects such as dizziness, nausea, and impaired cognitive function. There are also the psychotropic effects of the THC, the primary psychoactive component of the cannabis, and it can cause feelings of euphoria and altered perception. So, and especially if people don't know what their limits are. And I had pot many years ago. It's been a long time since I have. I've tried CBD tea recently, haven't done anything more than that. But one thing I know from talking to different people, the pot of today is not the same as the pot 30 years ago. And so it's a lot stronger. And so you need to be a lot more careful with how much you're having. There also needs to be additional studies on the long-term effects. What does it do? What long-term effect does it have on the brain? Does it change any of the brain structure or impairment of cognitive function? Or is there an increased risk of addiction? I know that it's quite often said that pot or cannabis is not addictive, and there might not be one of the definitions of addiction, which we've talked about in the sugar webinars, is that you need more and more to reach the same high, which is why sugar's not addictive. And I think that that's a bit of a gray area with pot. And even if you're not physically addicted to it, how behaviorally or emotionally addicted are you to it? I remember one of my boyfriends, because I've had issues around cannabis for a long time, and before we started dating, I had heard from the rumor mill that he had smoked a lot of pot. And I asked him about it, and he goes, no, I cut back. I don't do it as much as I used to. So I'm like, okay, great. Well, what that meant is he was doing it only once a day instead of 3 or 4 times a day. And so, but how different is that for someone coming home and having a little bit of marijuana versus someone coming home and having a cocktail? So I understand that as well. More research needs to be done if there's any kind of increased risk of psychosis, depression and anxiety, or schizophrenia. There are some studies that have shown that that is the case. So before doing too much, we want to make sure that that's not, I mean, the jury's still out on that. So I'd be cautious on using it too much. I had mentioned about some FDA approved medications, which I believe the Marinol and the Syndrose are for sure are synthetic, and they help with the reduction of nausea and vomiting and improvement with appetite stimulation, where the Epidiolex is used for patients with epilepsy. So let me just double check on, let's see. Oops. So yeah, Marinol's active ingredient is dronabinol, which is a synthetic form of THC. Sorry about that. That was my phone. Let me see. The Syndrose. So let's see. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter if it's synthetic or not. but those are what the FDA approved drugs do that do come from the THC to help with epilepsy and appetite stimulation and reduction of nausea and vomiting. One of the things that's happened here in New York, and I'm not sure what it's like anywhere else, is that we have a lot of these pop-up stores. Where I live, there is one on my block. I'm right on the corner of two streets, and on my block, there's one. Across the street on the other street, there's another, and then around the corner, there are like two or three. But a lot of these are what we're going to call like the bodegas. They're not the real deal. In New York State, there are only 66 licensed retailers for marijuana dispensaries, and 3 in Manhattan, 3 in the New York City area, or 3 in Manhattan. Or I think it's 3 in the New York City area. So there aren't that many. So you have these little pop-up stores that are popping up. And because there are so many of them popping up, the regulators can't keep up with them. And it's only going to be a matter of time before they're closed down unless they get the license as an approved retailer. But meanwhile, they're making tons of money and there's a lot less regulation on what they're selling. So it's really important that you go to a licensed dispensary. So there are some culinary uses. One of the ways is that you can make what's called the canna butter, which that's part of the lipid infusion where you're getting the THC and the CBD into the butter, and then you can use it for making different things. All right, so, oops, let me get back to my notes. So some of the implications of research, things that need to be taken a look at, is how can cannabis help with sleep, cannabis and weight management, cannabis and diabetes. There are already studies starting on that. And so there are additional studies that are needed. So I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm not saying that it's good. I'm also saying that there are studies that support it, studies that don't support it, and you need to find out if it works for you. Just make sure you check with your pharmacist and or doctor to make sure it's not going to interact with any other medication, and get it from a licensed retailer. So just a little bit of difference on some of the other things. Hemp seeds, like for example, hemp seeds oil contains the essential fatty acids and omega-3s with important health benefits, but they have very trace amounts of CBD and THC that aren't going to make any difference. Another place that has another food item that has terpenes in it is the turmeric, which is a good anti-inflammatory. And once again, it's not regulated. Just any of the food items that you get are not regulated, nor are the CBD supplements. So make sure you're getting it from a reputable source, because you don't know what you're getting is real, because it's not tested. So go with a well-known company. And so that's what I have for the presentation. Does anybody have any questions? I'll pop onto YouTube for a minute to see if anybody has any questions there. All right, we're just going to give it another minute because YouTube is delayed a little bit. Excuse me. All right, so let us finish this up then. Oh my goodness, I can't get back to the right tab. All right. So I want to thank you very much for being a part of this webinar. As you know, I offer a variety of different meal plans with Epicure Nutrition, just my little plug at the end, where you can load it up on your phone, you can load it up on your computer, and it gives you meal planning for the week that looks something like this. And then it also gives you the recipes, and for you, how much for leftovers, how much for someone else you're feeding. That's on the right, and on the left is the grocery list, and you can check off anything that you have at home. And last but not least, my contact information. So please reach out to me if you would like any, oops, that isn't what I wanted to do. Let's try that again. Reach out to me if you want any medical nutrition therapy, if you have any lifestyle changes, an optimized workout performance, take the confusion out of diets, or simply feel better. We have meal plans starting at $5 a week to offer you a personalized plan. Plus, we have some DNA testing to optimize nutrition outcomes. We're going to have a future webinar on the DNA testing that has been revised by one of my other interns. So I'm very excited to show that to you in the near future. And there are also individual counseling sessions with packages available. I want to thank you very much for joining us on Cannabis and Food. I hope you learned a little bit of something. And please reach out to me if you have any questions. Once again, my name is Karen Buchwald, and I am the founder of Epicure Nutrition. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much, and have yourself a great night.